Hello and welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another FPL video. In this one, it's going to be my reaction to the day 2 and day 3 player price reveals. We've had all 20 teams now at time of recording, which means the game is more than likely going to release this afternoon. So looking forward to that. We've got all 20 teams to cover here. We won't be talking about anything I've spoken about already, regurgitating what I've already spoken about, to be honest. So no need for that. We'll just be looking at the fresh ones that I didn't cover in the first video on Monday. And we'll have a little bonus section as well at the end of the video. So hopefully you enjoy it, guys. Let's jump into it. And we'll be looking, first of all, at Arsenal. So we did have Odegaard, and we've already spoken about him. So we'll completely ignore talking about him this time round. But the big news here, guys, is Bukayo Saka. Oh my God, I cannot believe that they've priced him the same as Odegaard. I really expected him to be 9.5 million, guys, if I'm honest. He's cheaper than Marcus Rashford. I don't know why FPL have done it, but they have. And to be honest, I just think he's going to be so template. He's an obvious choice on penalties. You know, scored a hat-trick recently for England as well. First of his career on an international stage. The guy I just think is a must-own, to be honest. I do like maybe the possibility of owning both of them. There is argument that you could say if you want to double up on Arsenal's attack that you do that. But Jesus also coming in at only 8 million is surprising to me. So who knows? It's really shaken up a little bit of the template, in my opinion, about who the kind of nailed-on choices are. But I do like that in some respects as well. Even Zinchenko, right, coming in at 5 million, very formidable defence last season overall, and also the attacking threat that's there as well. Really feel like a lot of these guys are underpriced, in my opinion. But let me know what your thoughts are. How many of these are going to make your team? Of course, Havertz as well, just one last kind of point to note. 7.5 million, reclassified as a midfielder as well. I think that's fair, based on his kind of lack of performances, you could say, last season. And also, we just don't know what he's going to do in an Arsenal shirt, right? So, possible option later down the line, but I don't think it's going to be game week 1 option at all. If we move through then to Aston Villa, we did have Ollie Watkins as a reveal on day 1. We've now had Buendia, Ramsey in midfield as well, coming in at 6 million apiece. Not really interested in that price point personally, but maybe options later down the line. I think Moreno out of these price reveals is someone that I'm considering as a potential differential. He has matched the same though as Estepinian, so maybe he's the more popular pick. We'll see. I do like to try and find very small and subtle differences to the template, though, if I can. And I think maybe Alex Moreno is one of them. His numbers were really good. And the way that Emery plays as well, I think it facilitates what Moreno can do on that left-hand side. So let's see. I think that price point is really good. Also worth noting that Tyrone Mings, I think, was revealed at 4.5 million as part of an email campaign as opposed to the tweet. So he's also a possible defensive option at such a budget price. We've then got Bournemouth next up. We only had Kluivert revealed on day 1, but we've since had Solanke, Traore, Rothwell and Zabani. I really don't think any of these are going to be an option other than Solanke, if I'm honest. I think there's going to be other teams that we can utilise for the 4.5 million defenders or the 4.5 defender slot. I don't like, kind of forcing the issue on certain template price points, but 4.5 million defender, I think, is normally a shoe-in for most people. So I just feel like there's other teams that we can target. We've definitely got options, like I've mentioned, in Mings for Aston Villa. Even Botman has been revealed, which we'll take a look at later on the video at 4.5. There are just other alternatives to him, so I don't see him being a factor. 5 million midfielders, again, not a price point I'm interested in. But Solanke is somebody maybe later down the line. We've seen what he could do. He's definitely, his goal involvement is good. Maybe with a creative individual like Kluivert behind him, maybe he can do something a little bit different and a bit special this season. Who knows? So that price point's also very interesting for me. We've then got Brentford. They also revealed several other players. Wissa, Henry, me, and Sharda. I think I've pronounced that right, so forgive me if I haven't. But midfielder now instead of a forward, which I think he was classified as last season. 5.5 million, though. Very strange price point for me once again. Me at 5 million. I think, to be honest, when you've got Rico Henry there at 4.5, Brentford were pretty good in terms of defensive numbers. But Henry, I would say, in terms of expected goal involvement, is probably up there slightly ahead of him. So I think he could potentially be that 4.5 option. Wissa at 6 million as a forward, maybe. It's a budget option as long as Tony's banned. We've got Mbeumo as that kind of, I think he's the strongest option out of the reveals, which is why he probably was revealed first, right? But who knows? Wissa could definitely come into the mix if he gets some solid minutes. Brighton next up. Kind of interesting, really, to see the price points on these guys. I think Estepinian at 5 is about right, which I'm kind of positive about because, like I said, with Moreno and him, maybe there's a shake up there in terms of the template or the 5 million slot, which is good. It gives us a decision to make. Gross and March also being priced the same as Matoma is also interesting because any one of these individuals could maybe hit a purple patch, right? Gross did it in a season before. I think, March and Matoma had their moments last season. I expect Gross to probably move into a more progressive role now McAllister's gone. So actually between all three of them, I think it's just a case of take your pick. I think Matoma's probably going to be the most sought after and selected because of his prowess, let's say, or his kind of his finishing power. I think is much better than the other two. I think March had a lot more shots last season, some of which obviously did convert. Gross, not so much in terms of FPL point of view, but did get some returns at points. But he was also playing as a makeshift right back at some point in certain games. So he wasn't really a selection last season, so hard to put into comparison. But I do think all three of these could possibly be options at that price. So really, really happy with that reveal. Moving into Burnley next up then. We've obviously already covered these from day one, so we'll skip those all the way through. We've then got Chelsea reveal. We had Sterling come in at 7 million. Absolutely crazy to me that he's fallen so far in terms of price from a premium back in his City days at like 11.5 million. I think he had a stint at maybe 10.5 million last season in a Chelsea shirt. Didn't really work out for him. And of course, he's now been reduced to 7 million. So that could also be a bit of an interesting pick. It's just the midfield just seems packed with options, to be honest, guys. Like, I can't see how we don't go with a 5-man midfield, if I'm honest. But that being said, Chilwell and Reece James also coming in at 5.5 million. Really close call between those guys, but really like the fact that they've been priced that low. I think they're going to be tremendous value this season. Surely for the Chelsea fans and just in general, right, for an FPL, they can't be any worse than what they were last season. So I think they're both really, really solid options. Mudryk at 6.5 again covers a really nice price point and maybe becomes an option later on. Crystal Palace next up. We already had Eze again at that 6.5 million point. Johnston at 4.5 goalkeeper, price point great. Same for Gahey and Mitchell. Two potential options if Palace fixtures swing at some point later on. Edouard at 5.5. Again, it's a maybe, guys. With any of these budget forwards, I don't see them being in the game week 1 template or us kind of starting with them. They're just not prolific enough, in my opinion. You spend that little bit extra in that second striker slot to Haaland, which I think most people will own, and you go as high as 7.5 or 8 million there to try and get as many points possible. There may be some weeks where they show a level of explosivity, but I don't think it's going to be consistent enough to warrant choosing them just yet. Then we've got Everton, kind of really average price points here. Of course, we had Pickford revealed. I mistakenly put him as 6.5 million. Of course, he's not. He's 4.5, so that's been corrected. Tarkovsky at 4.5 as well. Could be a great option. Doucouré, Iwobi and McNeil, though. Sorry, guys. Everton fans as well. It's just such a strange price point for me that I just can't get behind picking any of these players. So we'll move swiftly on to Fulham. Likewise for them, similar story. We've got a couple of 4.5 million options. Mitrovic is definitely the standout option there, though, at that 7.5 million mark. And I think we also had Reed revealed at 5 million, which again, a price point that I'll probably ignore for the most part. We've discussed Liverpool and we have discussed Luton already, so we'll skip through to Manchester City as the animations play out. And here, nothing really too surprising. I mean, De Bruyne, we kind of expected he was going to be cheaper. 10.5, though, unfortunately, I think is going to be a very awkward price point for a lot of people. It's just that 2 million cheaper to Salah, but 2 million more expensive than a Bruno Fernandes. And I just don't think it warrants us spending that amount of money on one player. It just makes more sense to try and stretch to your 12.5 of Salah, or just essentially, save the money and spend it elsewhere and go for someone like Bruno. So for me, that's kind of an avoid for now. I think Grealish at 7.5 is quite fair. I think that's, he had a purple patch towards the back end of the season. Still going to be competing for minutes more than likely with Phil Foden, you'd expect. But I do think he is pretty nailed on now for Pep. He's showcased a true level of form. I think the only time he's going to fall out of favour really in terms of pre-season is if he goes, absolutely wild on partying or something and just falls out of favour in that way. So maybe he's a really good option in the midfield at that price. Bernardo Silva's not nailed enough for me, unfortunately. John Stones with a progressive midfielder role. I like him at 5.5. Maybe an alternative option to someone like Reece James or Ben Chilwell. So very positive about City prices there. Manchester United next up, also positive about Luke Shaw being 5.5. I think that's again fair. Rashford coming in at 9, so 0.5 million more expensive than Bruno. I think I'm still swayed slightly towards the Portuguese Magnifico, if I'm honest. I think that penalty taking situation there for 0.5 million cheaper and the possibility of us signing a number 9, which means Rashford will always be out on that left-hand side, I think just puts me in that kind of favourable position for Bruno, if I'm honest. But I do still like that price for Rashford. It's the same price as Son. It gives people something to think about, and maybe there's a route to him if you keep some money in the bank for the game week 1 drafts potentially. Sancho's someone that, again, he's got competition for his place. He's not nailed at all, so 7 million is not something I'm interested in either. And Dalot, of course, we know Wan-Bissaka's more than likely staying and did a very, very good job of impressing Ten Hag throughout the season last season. So I think he's probably the nailed on, and Dalot's probably second choice. So not interested really in him. Newcastle, we definitely had a bit of a surprise with Botman being 4.5 million. I think most people anticipated him as being at least 5 million based on how prolific Newcastle were at the first half of the season defensively. But he's coming at 4.5, guys. So I think he potentially could be a shoe-in. Like I say, maybe Aston Villa's Mings as well comes in that slot. But yeah, it's great to have him as an option. Potentially even just season long, right? At that price, it just feels like a no-brainer. Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton coming in at 6 million. Cheaper options in the midfield, potentially, but neither of them really show a level of consistency, in my opinion, to warrant FPL choices. And then Isak at 7.5, I think is great. We know that, Nunez is that price point. He's 0.5 million cheaper than Watkins and Jesus. We've got Nkunku at 7.5, so plenty of options in that forward line at that price. So love that price point as well, giving us a bit of flexibility in who we choose. Nottingham Forest we've been through, so again, this is a skip. Sheffield United as well. Next up will be Spurs again as the animations play out here. A little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see Maddison's price point. I think he's more than likely going to be 8 million, but we didn't get a full reveal. Richarlison coming in at 7 million, reclassified as a midfielder. Strange price point, but it is the same as Bowen, Sterling, Sancho. Maybe if his minutes solidify at some point, he's someone that comes into our thinking, but I think between, if you look at Son, Kulusevski, Kane as that front three, I think that's probably going to be where they end up for the most part. But who knows? Perisic at 5 million. I've been reading reports that the new Spurs manager is very, very, let's say, fluid in his ways. He doesn't necessarily like defensive options or ways of playing in a football match. Almost kind of reminds me of Bielsa, where he'd much prefer to win a game 4-3 as opposed to winning a game 2-0 or 1-0, for example. So clean sheets, I think, are going to be a little bit off the menu for Spurs, at least in the early fixtures. Doesn't mean that they won't score goals, and Perisic is a creative individual, but I'm not sure I'm interested in him off the bat. Kane as well is going to be a little bit difficult to fit in if you're going for Haaland and Trent. It's just you have to make a little bit of sacrifices. I haven't made too many drafts yet with 2 premiums, but I can just see on the maths that it's almost impossible to reach. Next up, we've got West Ham. Yes, there's been a couple of price reveals here that I do like. I do like Bowen at 7 million. I think that's a very fair price point for him. He was 8.5 million, and it was just too difficult to get to him last season, really, to be honest. And he didn't really put out the numbers to warrant that price at the beginning. Aguerd, sorry if I've butchered that, guys, but 4.5 million, again, potentially comes into our thinking, but I do think there's more prolific defensive teams that can fill that slot. And then Ben Rama, maybe. He's a penalty taker at 6 million. I expect him to stay on penalties at least. Very, very good at them. So maybe he's an option on a wild card, maybe some kind of, again, reset of fixtures at some point. And finally, Antonio there, which I don't think many people are going to be interested in, which is a shame. Bit of a fall from grace for him in terms of FPL, but there we go. Wolves, again, price point similar to kind of that Everton mark as well. They've got a couple of 5.5 million midfielders in Hwang and Neto that I just don't really see many people wanting. But Kilman and Dawson, again, from that 4.5 million price point, potentially. So there we go. That's all 20 teams covered, guys. So the last section, the little bonus section, is just something I put together quickly for kind of what I feel like the template is doing at the moment. I know it might be really early for some of you, so you feel free to switch off at this point if you're not interested. But for me, for the most part, I think a lot of players, or at least about 3 or 4, look like they're going to be strong contenders for the template. So let's jump into it. We've got a team cost in front of us of 65.5 million with 34.5 million in the bank to play with. Now, to just kind of explain what the team cost consists of, all the players that are on the bench are included in that price, or cost, should I say, and also all the players that have icons against them, essentially, or the players themselves. So Trent, Estepinian, Saka, Matoma, Mbeumo, and Haaland, plus the bench equals 65.5 million. So hopefully that makes sense. It then gives you 34.5 million to fill in the blanks, essentially. So all the grey individuals that you see on your team, on the team in front of you, and also the price points of 4.5 or 4 million in terms of our bench options. I'm not going to specify who you should choose because there's going to be options there. I do think Bell is probably going to be the absolute 100% owned 4 million defender, if I'm honest, for most managers. So that's why he's been put there. But the rest of the bench options are going to be flexible for you to decide on. The rest of the grey, kind of greyed out individuals is going to be, again, a bit of a flex. You can go as high as 5 million on a goalkeeper, but maybe you have to sacrifice 0.5 million on one of your defensive options or the striker. But as a combined cost, I think that this is going to be kind of similar to where the template ends up, guys. I think, like I said, there's so many midfield options for us this season that for me, it's almost a no-brainer that we go for a 3-5-2. I will still probably put out several formation drafts just to see what you can do with maybe multiple premiums, maybe a 4-4-2, 4-5-1, something like that, as well, as we've got a couple of good defensive options to look at. But right now, this was kind of the first initial, after these price reveals, this was the initial spine of the team that I looked at and thought this could be the one, guys. I mean, after Saka was announced at 8.5 million, I just can't look past him anymore. Matoma, I think, is again a shoe-in. You could argue Estepinian is maybe a bit different. You could go with someone like Moreno. Mbeumo maybe is arguably, you could go as high as Grealish with him, maybe sacrifice and spread your money around a little bit more. Your forward line, in my opinion, can be anybody from Nkunku all the way to Jesus, Watkins, anybody like that. I think that's a little bit flexible as well. And then, of course, your goalkeeper and your defender. There are definitely options there. So I don't think we're going to see as many similar teams as we did last season, which is a positive. But of course, guys, from my perspective, I guess I've played FPL now for around 6 seasons. I think this is probably the most accessible and the most engagement they've tried to get from the game for quite a long time, which is why the prices are as they are. I can see why maybe some people are frustrated with it. Maybe they want a level of elitism in the game to some degree. But for me, it's all about just having fun and enjoying it. It doesn't matter in what capacity that is. For me personally, the more people that play the game, the better it is, not only for the community, but just the game in general, right? It's always improving. It's always looking to try and do things differently. In this season, it's decided to try and get higher engagement and pretty much not shut the door to the more casual players, right? So that's how it is. That's my thoughts, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the prices, what you think about this draft, what your thoughts are as well. And of course, as well, guys, we'll wrap up the video there and look forward to the drafting phase. We anticipate the game is going to be launching later on this afternoon. If it hasn't already, I haven't checked while I've been recording this, to be fair, but it may have already launched. So good luck making your drafts. I'll definitely be involved in alongside with you and releasing some more content soon on that. But yeah, last but not least, guys, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the content. And if you did and you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing to me for all future updates and content released. And of course, last but not least, smash that thumbs up on the video below, guys. So thank you very much for tuning in once again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.